Live from the top of the beautiful towers at Merle Hay Mall, all 6 stories of it, it's Faith Works Live with host Michael Damastis.
And I am so glad that you're joining us today on this wonderful Tuesday afternoon here in Des Moines, Iowa. Our temperatures continue to climb up a little bit every single day. It's been nice, but by this weekend, I think we're going to be kind of in Florida weather. It's going to be muggy and hot in the 90s. That's crazy. Summer is officially here. And I own 2 little turtles. And I keep them in an enclosure sometimes when the weather's really good outside. And so they're like, they love this weather. They think it's great. My 2 little turtles' names are Sunny and Sammy.
Aw.
I love turtles. And you should too. Who doesn't like a turtle? Everybody likes turtles.
They are a boring animal there.
Yeah.
Michael?
They're reptiles. They're snakes with legs.
Snakes with legs. Awesome. Well, hey, I am very excited to talk to you today, and I want to tell you a story as we begin in today's topic, because today's Life Day, and I want to tell you several years ago, in the year 2006, my grandfather, he passed away, but before he had died, his health had continued to wane, and he got very sick, and what I'm going to describe for you is a scenario that I would say most every family has found themselves in. He got to the stage where hospice became involved. They actually brought a bed to their home, and the bed was placed in the living room. I remember being there, and this is 2006 when my grandfather passed away. It's not terribly long ago. But I remember flying down and being there with the family and in the living room with the bed in the middle of Grandma and Grandpa's house, and that was odd in and of itself. And seeing my grandfather, them trying to make him comfortable, but seeing my grandfather still struggling, even though they were giving him medication to try to not have him struggle or be in pain, and he did. And as a believer, we might struggle with the idea of, well, what's wrong with just helping him end his life? I mean, he's already there. Why is that not the compassionate thing to do? And Kim Laube, you're here today, and I want to ask you that question. Why wouldn't we want to do that?
Right. Thank you for having me on today, Mike. And certainly I know your audience and we can all identify with that same story, and knowing and being with someone who is in the end of their life and maybe experiencing pain, and certainly it's incredibly uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be there and to feel like you want to take an action, and sometimes the prayer that we have or the comforting hand that we put on someone's hand and being there doesn't feel like enough.
Right.
But what we're called to do is to be in the ditch with someone when they are suffering and when they are in pain, and to experience that suffering with them, alongside them, to not leave them, and to be there in care and compassion. We are not called, and in fact, we are absolutely told that we are not to commit murder, and that we are not this would be a homicide, in order to increase medication to the point where we know that it's hastening death, or if our intent is to kill.
Right.
Then that absolutely is wrong by God's word. And it's certainly right now, it's wrong by our law in Iowa.
Sure.
But that may not be the case forever. And that's what, we're here to talk a little bit about today. And this is called physician-assisted suicide. There's lots of words for this. Maybe you've heard death with dignity,
sure,
or aid in dying. There's all sorts of things that it's called. Doctor-prescribed suicide. But in the end, what we're talking about is the possibility that a patient who has been given a terminal diagnosis of maybe 6 months to live would be eligible to receive poison that's prescribed by their doctor, that they might keep in their cabinet at home, and they might take when they choose to take it. And so this is called physician-assisted suicide, and there have been bills in the past 2 legislative sessions that have gone to this measure here in Iowa. I
think that's how you and I got to know each other, honestly, because I was up there speaking at the subcommittee hearings on this particular topic, and I remember you being around, and we started to engage in conversations.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's very correct. As a matter of fact, you're on the video that was done by the Des Moines Register at the time, and that video has been captured in the presentations that we give about physician-assisted suicide to congregations. And so you're a small part of the testimony you gave that day is a part of that particular video that we use.
Interesting.
Yes. Although it says you're from Fort Dodge instead of Fort Des Moines. So it threw a lot of people off because our Lutheran Family Service got its start in Fort Dodge, Iowa. We're very familiar with the various pastors and churches there, and so it really threw a lot of our people
they're like,
off.
Who is that guy?
Who is that guy?
Handsome man? Who is he?
Yes, indeed. But I do think that is where we did get to know one another, and that was not this past year, but the year before,
right?
Where the first attempt was made on physician-assisted suicide with Senators Bolcom and Taylor.
And so you can definitely appreciate the sentiment. I mean, as we have listeners, that are in the car, they know this struggle, and yes, maybe intellectually, I get it that it's wrong, I get it that it's not right, but you've heard this statement too. When we see our animals suffering, we'll put them down.
Exactly. I've heard this argument several times. Well, but what does the Lord tell us in regards to who we are? We're made in His image. We are not just an animal. We are special to the Lord, made in His image, and not to be taken lightly. And that's very different than an animal. And though I would continue and I would agree, and I'm certain someday I'll have to put an animal down, and that's an appropriate thing to do for an animal, which we are not.
Right.
We're God's creation, made in His image.
That's right. And what's hard in my book is that people that come at this that aren't coming from a biblical perspective, because we're talking about people that come from this from a biblical perspective, they are looking at the fact that we are, in an evolutionary mindset, we're all just, evolved apes.
Exactly.
And so that's, from a non-Christian point of view, that makes sense. But from a biblical worldview, just like you just said, there's no way we can embrace that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need to be very, very careful in not capturing that worldview, because we do. I mean, it's just in a linear fashion. People walk you right down it, and you have that belief about an animal. Mm-hmm. Then why would you not have compassion on a person? And it can be very difficult if we're not very, very careful about understanding our Bible and understanding what does it tell us. Does God say that we're going to have a pain-free life that's going to be fantastic as long as we're a believer? Absolutely not.
Right.
There is suffering, and we need to be in the ditch with those who are suffering at that time, being with them, staying in relationship with them, and providing the care. Care, yes. Kill, never. And
yes. Kill, never. I love that. Now, Kim, you're with Lutheran Family Service.
Right.
And just tell me a little bit about your organization.
Sure. Our organization started in 1901, so we've been around for quite some time, and we started in the area of adoption. And we can still, my position is as Life Ministries Director, and part of that is to direct the adoption agency that we have, which is pregnancy counseling for all women throughout Iowa. And we do provide adoption services for them if they choose that would be the right path. Otherwise, we provide parenting counseling, and we do a lot of connection with groups like Agape and other crisis pregnancy centers where they can receive a lot of great parenting training and information. And so we do a lot of collaboration. But the other really big part of what we do is to provide mental health care. And we do that at a variety of different locations in Iowa throughout the state. Right over here across the parking lot is a great example. We're over in the Merle Hay Center. And right now today here, the studio's in the tower. But we've got...
That's the Tower of Truth.
That's right. The Tower of Truth. We're over just across the parking lot with several master level trained counselors that provide mental health counseling in the area of marriage or depression or all sorts of reasons that people may seek their help.
And this particular issue of physician-assisted suicide is one that is of personal great interest and passion for you. Is there a reason for that?
Well, life is an issue, and it always has been for me. My career, many years ago, I was the executive director of Iowans for Life, and this issue as well as abortion are very, are a part of all of that. And so it's been a couple of decades that I've been working on these issues, and I think God just put it on my heart to be able to speak out about life and the importance of life, whether it be the beginning of life or ending of life. That we need to speak out and talk to people. And at Lutheran Family Service, we've started that after. It was last September. We rolled out a presentation that we've made that we give to Bible study classes. We are a recognized service organization of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So we start there. And we have many churches throughout Iowa where we've gone, and we started with talking to the pastors, because the pastors have to understand that this is an issue. And, we've got to get in front of this. We were not in front of abortion, were we?
No.
And we can see where that's gotten us.
Right.
If we can get out in front of this, we need to understand there is, to quote a friend of mine, Chuck Hurley, who you probably know
very well,
there is a freight train coming for Iowa, and it's called physician-assisted suicide.
Well, and what's frustrating to me as a pastor who's been up and spoke at the State House concerning this particular issue, I've fought, the last couple sessions on this. I have. There have been men and women who have come up from other, quote, I'm using the word in quotes, churches that have argued the other side.
Correct.
Ministers from Plymouth Congregational Church or from the Unitarian Universalist Church. And I remember one particular female minister, I think she was from Plymouth, and she was arguing about, we need to be able to let people, quote unquote, die with dignity and blah, blah, blah. And I just walked up to her afterwards because I was angered by her. And I said, hey, do me a favor. If somebody in my church is sick and they have been put in a hospital and it doesn't look good, do me a favor and never visit them, please. Absolutely. No, it's infuriating to really see that apparently the religious viewpoint that's, coming up or being testified for in these Senate hearings are completely false to God's word. And it is.
So we need other pastors to become involved, not only as a voice in the public square, but also in their congregations. And those people in the pews, they need to understand.
Absolutely. Physician-assisted suicide. Is this an issue that you care about? I mean, have you thought this one through? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. 515-727-KTIA.
You're listening to 99.3 FM The Truth, where we don't just rock the gospel, we talk the gospel. But don't just sit there listening. Come join us. Text or call 515-727-KTIA.
And I'm Michael Damastis, and I'm the host of Faith Works Live. Our show is proudly sponsored by Baldwin Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, and I'm very thankful for that. And we are talking about physician-assisted suicide. And we received a text during our break. Chris, I'd like you to share that text.
Yeah, our text says, I am one of the people that struggles with this. I'm not afraid of my suffering, but I don't want to be a burden to others.
Wow, that's very honest. I want to thank you for sending that in, for our texters sharing that, because I think that speaks to a lot of people's fears. Don't you, Kim?
Oh, 100%. You've heard this idea of being a burden to others over and over again. As a matter of fact, that's part of the vocabulary that's used by the proponents of physician-assisted suicide, because the idea is they're putting that in your head, that you are a burden to others. But what I want to share with you today is that Christians need to be able to serve and support and love others.
Yes.
And if we don't allow, if you were to decide that physician-assisted suicide was better and that you didn't want to burden anyone, that takes the opportunity for me to be able to serve you away from me. And I need you to be Jesus to me, to allow me to do that. And I need to do that for you. And that is what we're here to learn. We're learn to serve. We need to learn to be together, like I said earlier, in the ditch with each other when we're with suffering. And so that idea I want to leave you with, that we need to be able to serve one another and not to take that away from each other. That's the purpose. Most people, for so much of what we hear is, why am I still here? What is my purpose and why am I lingering on? And that is the purpose. God works through suffering and he works through weakness. And he may be working in you or working around you, but there's a purpose for you being here, or the Lord would have taken you.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain things that you can't learn any other way.
Right.
There's certain lessons that can't be grasped only but through suffering.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's the truth.
It is. And I not to mention, let's look at the other side of this. If you made a choice to take poison and to end your life, and your family felt that you did that because you didn't want to be a burden to them, well, what does that leave them with? The selfishness that they must feel that they were projecting to you, that you felt that way, that to not be a burden. I don't think that would at all be good for your extended family as well, to feel that in that way.
Right.
So it's to consider.
I totally agree.
Do you feel like this issue comes from patients a lot more, or from families, or who expresses? Does everyone express concern about this?
Thank you. Wow, that was just the best setup, right? Okay. So if you really look at the organization who puts together the idea of physician-assisted suicide and making it legal in the various states, it's a group called Compassion and Choices. And that group used to be called the Hemlock Society, which apparently had a little bit of a PR issue with the name. But now Compassion and Choices is their name. They are heavily, heavily funded by George Soros, the tune of over $7 million.
What?
Exactly. That, and along with a lot of other very liberal agenda issues. So I would counter the argument that this is a groundswell of people that are saying we've got to have this in Iowa. What I say is this is being pushed down your throats. The vocabulary is being taken over by Compassion and Choices. The media has jumped on board, which especially we were talking at break about Brittany Maynard. And and maybe some of you don't know or did not see, but she was a young woman who was determined to end her own life through physician-assisted suicide, moved to Oregon in order to do that. She had a brain tumor, and she was a very young woman, and her video was just viral. And so there's over 500% media increase since then in regards to physician-assisted suicide, and it's very pro physician-assisted suicide.
Absolutely.
In all of our not all of our media. Obviously, we're on today talking about the truth,
right?
But not all of our media is doing that, and so there's absolutely a huge increase of media. But
it's hard. I mean, even as a believer in Jesus, I mean, I can identify with not wanting to go through a horrible thing. We had a wonderful family in our church that young mother had ALS. She passed away. It's one of the most difficult funerals I've ever performed.
Right.
But just seeing the struggle up close and personal, we loved them. They were our friends. It wasn't just I'm their pastor and my wife. We were genuinely very close with this couple, very good friends, and just seeing the hardness of that. And if you have a loved one with ALS, I mean, it's like you've boarded a train and there's one destination, and nobody can kind of get out of that. And it's a really horrible thing. And what I can appreciate is just all of the fears. I don't want to have this happen. I don't want to experience this. I don't want that. I get that, but it's not my call.
Right.
It's not my call. It's not anybody's call, really.
Absolutely.
Jessica on Facebook shared that she did a master's degree. She's working on her master's degree in counseling and Christian counseling, and she had done a paper, she said, on euthanasia, where she did a case study, an ethical scenario case study on euthanasia. And she said one of the scriptures that really touched her is Psalm 39, verse 4, to let her realize, she said, I just want God to continue to remind me of how brief my time here is on this planet.
Absolutely.
None of us are guaranteed a long life.
No, absolutely not. And of course, God has all his plans for good, and he will make them for good. But I also want to touch on one thing that she said in regards to a term we haven't talked about, and that is euthanasia. And there's a lot of confusion for people about what does that even mean. And so I'd like to straighten that out. Physician-assisted suicide, as I described earlier, is a doctor prescribing poison for you that you can put on your shelf in the kitchen and you can take when you decide to take it. Euthanasia is actually a doctor injecting poison into a person. So he has something active that he or she is doing to end your life for you by your request. There is. Yeah. There is a difference. Here in the United States, physician-assisted suicide is available to 52.2 million Americans. And those would be in a handful of states that have passed legislation and this is a biggie, okay? It's not just a legislative issue. It is also a judicial issue. It can go through the courts, and it can bypass any legislative process. As a matter of fact, here in Iowa, we have seen a litigant come forward in 2016 and begin a lawsuit for her right to die. And she has withdrawn that a few months later. And here's, interestingly, the reason she withdrew. Was the death of her father that was very unexpected. And her quote was, "It took the wind out of her sails."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful when she saw it up close and personal.
Right. Well, and she didn't simply say, "I don't agree with it anymore," but she was no longer willing to be that litigant and withdrew her lawsuit. But that doesn't mean Compassion and Choices isn't out there looking for other litigants to bring this forward in a judicial way in Iowa.
Right. Well, this is an incredible topic, and it's challenging, and it's one that I believe believers in Jesus Christ need to have a clear voice on, because this is part of being pro-life, is understanding all the dynamics from birth through natural death. That's what it means to be pro-life. Give us a call or text us, 515-727-5842.
It's Mikey, he's better than TV. We're listening to Mikey, and best of all, it's free.
That's my mother-in-law, Linda Curry. She's currently at my house. She's here for at least 24 more hours, counting down the minutes till she heads back home. My mother-in-law is a great person. She writes great jingles. My name's Mike Damastis, and I'm the host of Faith Works Live. And I want to introduce you to a concept that has kind of had me thinking about this topic for quite a while. Okay, I want to listen to this word, embryo. We've all heard the term embryo, and then here's another word, adoption. Okay, so embryo and adoption. Now put those two together, embryo, adoption. We know the word embryo, we know the word adoption, but you put them together and there's a new concept. And I am really, to be blunt, I'm admitting I'm uninformed. And so what is that?
Well, thank you. That's a great lead-in. Let me tell you about embryo adoption.
Okay.
First of all, embryos are created through the process of IVF. And if people are not completely familiar with that, in vitro fertilization is a treatment that is given for those who are infertile. And what happens are a woman's body is going to be medicated in order that they might extract the most eggs from that woman during her cycle, and that there can be a variety of eggs that are extracted at that time, and could be maybe up to 20. That would be a pretty big extraction. But what happens is then sperm is then introduced to each one of those eggs in a petri dish, and so the fertilization, or these embryos are being conceived outside of the womb rather than inside of the womb. And so what we have are embryos, which are the beginning of life.
Right.
A fertilized egg is what we all believe is from the beginning of life. So we have these embryos. And what will happen during this process is a woman during her fresh cycle, which means the same time frame, the embryos are created, they grow for a few days. One or two of those embryos then would be implanted back into the woman. but there are remaining embryos, and those embryos are going to be cryopreserved. And the hope is that the family, the couple, will have additional times they will come and have those embryos thawed, and they will be placed in that woman's womb, and hopefully an additional pregnancy and child is being born.
So after the embryo has been frozen, it can be unfrozen.
That is correct.
And put back into a woman.
Yes.
And that woman can give birth from. Just because I'm lacking information on this and knowledge, that does happen.
Absolutely, all the time. But what also happens is...
So is cryogenics really possible?
Well, yes, in terms of embryos, it is.
Wow, this is crazy. So maybe like that one baseball guy that froze himself after he died, he might actually... I'm sorry.
Well, we might be a step or two away from that.
Yeah, okay, but I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But here's the problem, right? So families make these plans, they get involved in vitro fertilization, and sometimes they don't realize that they're going to have some really big life issues that are going to smack them in the face.
Right.
And that is, maybe from that first cycle, the 2 embryos were implanted and they had twins. And they have 2 children they're raising.
Right.
Maybe they have 8 embryos left that are cryopreserved, and they now feel like their family is complete. Or, maybe something bad has happened. Maybe there's been a divorce, or perhaps a death of one of the couple, and they just feel like there's no way that they can have any more children. And so now they're in this quandary. They're either going to have to keep these little boys and these little girl embryos are going to have to remain frozen, or they are going to be thawed, which means they are killed, or they are going to be given to research, which means they are thawed, they are researched, which kills them. But the only life-affirming option for those embryos in that situation would be if a couple is willing to adopt those embryos and the conceiving couple was willing to donate those embryos. And so Lutheran Family Service became involved in this from the idea of, first of all, we are experts in adoption. We've been doing that for 116 years. And we are very much interested in life and issues of life. And this is a tribe of little boys and little girls that are never going to know or love, or to hear the love of Jesus Christ, or have baptism, or have an opportunity at life. Not life, but at birth, excuse me. And so we really would like to try and have an opportunity to bring couples forward who would be willing to receive these embryos, which means that they're willing to have these embryos transferred into the woman's uterus. And hopefully that there will be implantation and pregnancy and birth.
Sure. So has this happened?
Absolutely. And the
embryo adoption has occurred.
Oh, yes, it has.
In our state?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. I'm just so this is such a new concept, and everything that I'm hearing is crazy, because I didn't even know this. I mean, this is do you feel the same way? If you're listening to this, is this brand new to you? Because this is big. I've not even considered this.
Right.
And it's huge.
It is. I mean, there's certainly, first of all, there's an opportunity for embryos. This is a huge tribe of human beings that need our help.
Right.
Because they don't have any there's not another path that is going to have an outcome for birth and opportunity. So there is an opportunity for us to really be of value to these little boys and little girls, as well as the couple that conceived them that are now wondering, what do I do? I'm in this quandary. And Lutheran Family Service is not judgmental about those who have used IVF in this process.
Right.
Our goal here is rescue.
Okay.
And so we're looking for Christian couples who would be willing to consider embryo adoption. It is a process. You'll find this interesting. Of course, we call it adoption, but I want you to know the reality of the law in Iowa is this is a property transfer. So this is a contract and a property transfer, but it is a special property transfer in that no money can exchange hands between the couple who conceived the embryos and the couple who is receiving the embryos. But there are going to be expenses involved in the process, in the attorneys are drawing up contracts in the matching process of matching couples. And then we also are using our best practices of adoption when it comes to this process, even though it's contract law. And so what I mean by that is we're not just willy-nilly saying anybody can adopt embryos, but we're going through the home study process that we go through when we have a typical infant adoption or older child adoption. We need to make sure that people are safe and appropriate for parenting the children that would be born to them through embryo adoption.
Wow.
Well, does that work in the same way like an open and closed adoption, like with like a mom placing her new baby for adoption? Can you speak to that?
Yes, it's very similar to that. And so the process, the way it works for us is at Lutheran Family Service, we're going to do the social work that's involved. And then we partner with an agency called Nightlight Christian Adoptions who helps with the matching. And the matching process is what you're referring to. And so we use profile books, which are like Shutterfly albums that are pictures and text that explain what the receiving family is like. And then there's also one for the donating family. And donating is a weird word to use here for people. Okay,
Absolutely.
So understand, I know it's weird, but I also want you to understand exactly who I'm talking about. So there is a matching process that's like that, and it's sort of a spectrum on how much openness do they want. Mm-hmm. But it is almost a foregone conclusion that there are siblings, full siblings, that are alive and living in another part of the country. And so because there are full siblings, first of all, having at least the agency have knowledge of where does everybody live and who is everybody.
Wow.
That those things become very important. The social work here is big.
It's kind of a mind-blowing concept. I mean, this idea of embryo adoption, and I love this. I love the concern for human life. I mean, this is really big in Iowa because that's the number one plank for the Republican Party of Iowa, that life begins at conception. So much so that we passed wait a minute. I'm sorry. I was taking that farther than I should have,
right.
I guess.
Hopeful.
Yeah, maybe when we come back in next session, we can actually pass life at conception. But that's really what it boils down to. We say we believe that, right, but we haven't put it into practice. But you guys are. Lutheran Family Service is doing that, and they're doing that because of their concern for these human babies, these little boys, these little girls. Exactly. That have been put in a freezer, but they're going to be brought out at some point.
That's right.
And so we want to make sure that when they're brought out, they're actually being given to a mommy and a daddy.
Right. That is the hope. That's the goal of what we're doing. And if you have listeners that want to learn more about that, June 19th, we are having an embryo adoption seminar right here in Urbandale. As I mentioned earlier in the program, we're right across the parking lot. We are at the Merle Hayes Center, and you can go to www.lfsiowa.org and sign up for that seminar.
lfsiowa.org and sign up for the seminar. It's on June when again?
June 19th.
June 19th to learn about embryo adoption. My mind has been blown. That is, what a crazy concept. And I hope that you understand being pro-life is more than just, rescuing babies. We're all about that. But we're talking today about a lot of stuff. And when we come back, we're gonna kind of jump back into what we were talking about earlier about physician-assisted suicide, because it's such an important topic. We'll be right back.
From Altoona to Windsor Heights, you can hear us, so why not join us? Call or text 515-727-KTIA.
Did you know that a leaky faucet can actually, if left unrepaired, waste more than 3,000 gallons of water a year? Have you ever heard of a silent toilet leak? Silent toilet leaks occur when water does not appear to be running but is being released. Silent toilet leaks can waste thousands of gallons of water every single year. Nathan Shanks, the owner of Baldwin Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, sees problems like this every single day. He can quickly, efficiently, and affordably help you resolve any of your plumbing issues. No problem is too small. No challenge is too large. Call Baldwin Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing today at 515-371-4036. That's 515-371-4036. Now, I'm Mike Damastis. I'm the host of Faith Works Live, and we have been talking about a whole lot of challenging concepts today. And one of the concepts that we began with, and one that I think most of us have, because here's the thing, talking about the embryo adoption is, I don't know why, but mentally, it's kind of put in another category for me. And I'm not saying that it's not important. I really believe with you, strongly with you. I'm with you. It's just that when it comes to the issue of physician-assisted suicide, for most of us as humans, this is not an academic talk, because we have all been by the bedside of somebody that we deeply care about, and we all have that empathy with, understanding, I don't want them to suffer. And seeing most of us, I would say, haven't had really any kind of an encounter with a frozen embryo. So
it's hard to have a relationship with a frozen embryo.
Exactly. Yes. So it's, what I mean? It's not in necessarily the same kind of easiness to accept this and embrace that. So I get it. And when we're talking about physician-assisted suicide, it's hard to escape that whole idea that, man, I just don't want them to suffer. I don't. And as we've already brought up, I mean, that's really not our call.
Right. It isn't our call, but it is our call to be in relationship with them.
Yes. While
they're suffering.
Yes.
And we also need to have some wisdom about what we do. There are options. There is palliative care. Mm-hmm. There are many things that a doctor can do, things that are absolutely not immoral, mm-hmm. To use some pain control. It all has to do with the intent. The intent can't be to take a life, but certainly our intent can be to help alleviate suffering and to stay in relationship with the person who is suffering, but not to alleviate the sufferer.
Right. Now,
mm-hmm.
and the other side of that is that when people think that, hey, I need to do this, like, and especially we brought up Brittany Maynard in her particular case, when she made the decision to take her own life with physician-assisted suicide, she did so when she was pretty lucid. She was she was not at end stage. She was well. She wanted to kind of go out when she could do it on her own accord. Basically, is what I think the mm-hmm. big deal was. That's a challenge,
right?
Because the deal is we would look at her, if she had grabbed a gun and put it up to her head and pulled the trigger, we would say, unequivocally, she took suicide, or she killed herself, she took her life. But somehow, by a doctor giving her a bag of pills mm-hmm. to take and swallow, that makes it better.
Right. Well, and as a matter of fact, not only does it maybe seem better to you, but when you look at the actual legislation, the piece of legislation that has passed several states in the U.S. and that was, considered here in Iowa, actually says that what has happened in this incident cannot be called. It cannot constitute suicide, assisted suicide, or mercy killing, or homicide, and that is to protect the doctor from having any sort of lawsuits against them. But the entire idea is that we're going to make this something it's not. This right. is the legislation is saying we're lying.
Yeah.
We will put on the death certificate that they died from ALS or from pancreatic cancer or whatever their ailment was. They don't put on the death certificate that they died from suicide or physician-assisted suicide. So it's a complete falsehood.
It is untruth, and I think it's another way to skirt around, being able to make sure that your insurance isn't canceled or denied upon that. Maybe you have life insurance and there's a suicide clause in there, and if the doctor puts that on the death certificate, then you're out that too. And so there's a lot of factors I think that go into that. But the fact of the matter is, we cannot let the language be redefined when we know what is actually happening. But isn't this happening with so many things? We're redefining gender, we're redefining marriage, we're redefining what it means to murder.
Right. Well, in this case, we're redefining healthcare, because there's another insurance issue. It's not just that of the death certificate and life insurance being paid out. There's an insurance issue for people with health insurance, because not all of us would choose physician-assisted suicide. Some of us would choose treatment.
Right.
And so what's happening, and there are examples in Oregon, and then most recently here this last summer in California when they passed physician-assisted suicide, of people who want treatment for their cancer or their ailment, and they have been refused treatment by their health insurance, and they have been given an authorization that they will pay for the pills for physician-assisted suicide. So can you imagine receiving that letter? So when, and our healthcare system is obviously broken.
We won't help you live, but we can help you die.
Right. And that's the message that's being sent to these.
That's disgusting.
Yeah.
And here's another side note as I kind of mentally go through this. What angered me, as an aside, with the Brittany Maynard case was that she was being propped up as this hero, this brave, courageous soul that's doing this wonderfully courageous act, and she's going to, it's so brave what she's doing. And I thought that makes me so angry when I have seen people that I have ministered to as a pastor, that I have loved as family members, who have bravely faced death.
Right.
And showing their family more dignity in the fact that they were not scared to face the suffering. They just wanted to be able to be around their loved ones and to let God do his thing. And whenever the end of their day was, they were facing all of that, and they were so courageous in doing that. There's nothing, frankly, in my mind, courageous about saying I don't want to experience this.
Yeah, there isn't. It's not courage.
It's not courage.
It's demanding control. And that is not, what we're taught. That's not what God has told us in the Bible. He is in control. He's in control in our weakness. He is his greatest, his greatest feats will be shown. And there's so much to be learned for people to surround those who are in their dying days, to learn servanthood, to learn to be compassionate,
right,
and to face it head on, and not to hide from it or to ever pressure someone that they're a burden and they should decide to take pills instead.
Right.
Poison is what it needs to be called.
Right.
That's what it is.
And that is what it is. And that's, it's taking medicine that's going to stop certain organs like your heart or your lungs or whatever from working, and you inevitably are going to die. I just this is a challenging issue. I mean, I can't say that it's not. It is complex. I guess from this standpoint, you could argue, because I always say that abortion isn't a complex issue when you look at the fact that we're talking about a human life. But honestly, in the same vein, this is the same way. The only difference for me, and maybe it's because I've been by the bedside of a person that's been suffering and dying, is that it's complex in the sense that I don't want them to suffer. I don't want them to have that pain. I know that it's there. I can't take it away. Even though there are proponents that say I could, but I get it. I get the feeling. And my friend Tim Overland on Facebook says, plus, why is Brittany a hero and Robin Williams a tragedy?
Right, exactly.
That is a really great question, Tim. That is a really great question. Because we think that because he did that was a tragedy, and Brittany Maynard took her own life. Why isn't it the same thing? We got so many mixed, confusing messages on this. That's why I'm so thankful for God's word, because it's the one thing that doesn't change. Our culture's so messed up on all of these topics. Don't look to them for the answers on what's right and what's wrong. We got to get it from the Word of God, and the Word of God is clear. And Jessica said it a little bit earlier, but I think it's so important for us to remember that we need to have the Lord teach us to number our days. We're only here for a little while. We're like James says we're like a mist, like a vapor, as you see it in the morning time, and then the sun shines and it's just gone. That's our life. But we cannot take it away on our own. And that idea you said, that's where we're wanting to grasp control. That's a lie. That's deception. We can never have control. Only God has control. He's sovereign, not us.
Amen.
And I'm so glad, Kim, that you were with us today. Lutheran Family Service. And go to their website, lfsiowa.org, to learn more about their organization. And I'm so thankful you listened today, too. We'll talk to you tomorrow. God bless.